Hello, friends. Bishop Andy C. Lewter here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my Bishop Lewter interviews. This is a series of programming that we do for churchtalkradio.com. It is also a part of the episcopacy.com, which is the official website for the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship bishops. And so I am delighted today to have an extraordinarily exciting guest with me today in the person of Bishop Lester Love. Bishop, do say hello to us.
Greetings to you, Bishop, and I'm glad to be on, Bishop. I have always had nothing but the greatest amount of admiration for you, your scholarly approach, your sensitivity to people, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you today.
Well, I am so excited. I'm grateful and thankful. So very appreciative, Bishop, that you have joined us today. And there are a number of things that we want to talk about today. You were with Full Gospel in the very, very beginning. And I want to argue today that you were with Full Gospel before there was a beginning of Full Gospel. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the adjutancy. We're going to talk about armor bearers. We're going to talk about the fellowship. We're going to talk about new leadership. We're going to talk about transition. There's just a number of things that we're going to talk about today. But before we talk about any of those things, I want to talk about Bishop Lester Love. I don't want to assume that the persons who are viewing this are already familiar with you. You have thousands of followers on Periscope. I follow you on Periscope, on YouTube. In terms of branding, in terms of social media, you are one of the most computer savvy individuals that I know. And so we'll talk a bit about that and your perception of the usage of social media in ministry today. But before we get to any of that, let's go back, peel back the title, Bishop, talk about Lester Love, who he is. He's a native of where, came up where. Give us a bit of your personal biography, Bishop.
Sure. Bishop, I actually am recognized by New Orleans, but I was actually born in Canton, Mississippi. My father had this thing that all of his children would be born in Mississippi. So even though he met my mother in New Orleans, since he wanted all of his kids to be born in Mississippi, he shipped my mother to Mississippi to have me. 11 days later, moved us back to New Orleans. And I've been in New Orleans ever since. My father is actually the son of a preacher, Reverend Monroe Love. So I'm a grandson of a pastor. And I really believe my father had a calling on his life. He was an extraordinary salesperson, big personality, great guy. So I grew up somewhat like as a grandson of a preacher, but my family didn't go to church. My family did not go to church. So I started going to church with my next door neighbor. We went to a church kind of close to our home. And it was a good church. It was a traditional Baptist church. Loved the church, sang in the Sunbeam Choir. But then, Bishop, to me, I think this is where my ministry mindset began to develop because we would do the normal Baptist church, have church at 10 o'clock, go downstairs, get something to eat, come back to the 3 o'clock program. And it just became long. It became boring. And I said, I was going to become Catholic. I was going to become Catholic. I went to parochial Catholic schools all of my life. And I said, I'm going to be an altar boy and work in the Catholic Church. So I stopped going to church for a while. And my neighbor across the street, Mrs. Naomi Morris, Miss Doll we called her, invited me to this little church that she was going to. So I said, okay. I went to this church. I'm about 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. And I went to this church. It was jam-packed, people all over the place. You couldn't get a seat. I sat in the balcony, and there were closed-circuit televisions in the balcony because you couldn't see downstairs. And it had this guy. He was so charismatic and so energetic, and he can preach and he can sing. So I started liking this church, and he wasn't in there very long. So I started going to this little church, and he was building this church next door. The church that we probably sat 400 people, 300 people. And he was building this church next door that sat like 1,200, 1,500 people. And because of my competitive nature, I said, you know what? I'm going to be the first person to join the new church. All right? It had nothing to do with hearing from God. It had nothing to do with spirituality. It had nothing to do with any of those things. I just wanted to join this new church. So January 1980, his brother, Bishop C.L. Morton, preached the introductory message, and I ran down the aisle and joined Greater St. Stephen Missionary Baptist Church. Reverend Paul S. Morton is the pastor. Yeah, I started going to the church. I was there every Sunday morning for 10:45. Then one Sunday, you know, the normal thing for kids 15, 16 years old, go to church, your mama gave you some money, you put a little bit in church, and you go around the corner to get some candy, some Now Later, some Jolly, just some lemon heads. But before I left out, Deacon Cleveland Smith stopped me and said, boy, sit here with your pastor while he shakes hands. I'm like, oh, man, I don't want to do that. But I was always kind of obedient, so I did it. And I sat there, and little did I know, from that moment on, I'd be sitting at my pastor's feet.